So another strategy that builds genre awareness are what are called frames, or some people call them templates. And so this is when you provide students, at least at first, with a structured piece of writing and ask them to fill in some of the blanks. And what this allows us to do as educators is model some of the moves that writers can make that may not come naturally to many of our students. So this particular frame is from a reading response essay that I have my students do in their first year writing class, so in Writing 111. And so this reading response is responding to an essay called What's So Wrong with the Brady Bunch, and it asks students to refer to that text and draw from that text in responding to it. So in the first paragraph, we introduce the idea in her essay. Brittingham describes what? So students have to figure out, what is the essay describing? Through details about her experiences growing up, she argues that what? So students have to figure out, what's the central argument of this particular essay? And then it goes on to, although her mother's view of the Brady Bunch was what? So that's asking for a summary of the mother's point of view. Brittingham states that what? So they have to figure out, what is Brittingham's response to her mother's point of view? As she herself put it, then they need to include a quote from the essay. So it's showing them, how do you set up a direct quote with a signal phrase? And then finally, in sum, her view is blank. And then the second paragraph is the reader's response. So the first sentence asks students to write a short position statement, and this is really uncomfortable for students. For many of them, it's the first time they've written a two-word sentence as part of an academic piece of writing, and so we talk about how it can be a powerful strategy as an academic writer to have a simple two-word sentence or four-word sentence that makes it really clear what your position is in starting that response. So they have to say, I agree, or I disagree, or I have mixed feelings. And then it goes on. In my view, shows like the Brady Bunch blank, and they have to figure out, what is their opinion about the TV show or shows like that show. And then they need to elaborate on that. So in addition, blank. So what else can they say about that point of view? And then some might object, of course, on the grounds that blank. So this asks them to think about, what might other people think that conflicts with their own opinion about the essay. And then they need to respond to that. So say, yet I would argue that blank. So that's a response to that, or a rebuttal to the opposing point of view. And then finally, they need to wrap up their opinion with a very complex sentence structure. So overall then, I believe blank, an important point given that blank. And so this particular frame provides some structured academic writing, but it also allows students to incorporate their own ideas into that piece of academic writing, and shows them some of the moves that they might not normally make. What I do with this sort of writing is, over the course of the semester, I gradually make the template less structured. So this is the first one I do in the semester, and then the next one has bigger blanks and smaller text provided, and then by the end of the semester I say, write a 2-paragraph response and give no structure to the students, and they, by that point in time, have internalized a decent reading response structure. And so a great resource on frames and template is the They Say, I Say text. You might recognize this from your own first year writing class. This book gives lots of ideas for how you might provide framing language for students related to academic writing. Another strategy for building genre awareness is using visual organizers. And so for this strategy, you provide students, usually as part of their pre-writing or as part of their reading of particular genres of text, You provide them a visual organizer that matches the structure of that text. And the important thing is that you pick a visual organizer that matches the genre, so that that the structure of the visual is similar to the structure of the text itself. So now I'd like you to look at these 6 different organizers and figure out which one would you use for a comparison contrast essay. And then secondly, I'd like you to figure out which one would you use for a narrative essay. So pause the recording now and jot down on your exercises sheet which of those 6 you would pick for each of those genres. So for the comparison contrast essay, you probably pick the bottom left visual organizer. This is what's called a Venn diagram, and it allows you to, in the outside of the circles, talk about things that are different about 2 things, and then in the adjoining part of the circles, talk about what's similar about them. So that's a great visual organizer for comparison contrast. And then for the narrative sequence, you probably picked the upper right. So this allows you to talk about events that happen in a particular sequence. For other aspects of narrative, you might have picked one of the other visual organizers. So for instance, the middle right one would be great for thinking about characterization, or maybe the upper left would be a good one for thinking about motives in a story. So there's lots of ways to use these. They're very flexible, but this is a good way to help students organize their writing. Another helpful strategy for building genre awareness is to provide students with models or mentor texts. So this set of texts is from a writing workshop I did with 7th graders as part of an after-school program where the students interviewed a community member and wrote a short biography about them. So I had the students read a number of other short biographies so that they could see what that sort of text included and how they were used and what sorts of things they talked about. And so these are an example of a set of mentor texts for that particular genre of writing. I also use this quite regularly in my college level classes. So for instance, in my Writing 111 class, when students wrote that essay, that set of essays you read, which was an argumentative essay, they read a couple of Alaska-based argumentative essays, one about language in the state and one about a debate over an oil tax. And so they could see how that sort of genre might be used in all sorts of different contexts. And then when I do that sort of mentor text activity, I have students engage in some sort of genre analysis. So at its simplest level, I might have students look at the content and language of a text. So with my 7th graders, I say, what do you notice about the content of biographies, and what do you notice about the language of biographies? As students get more mature in their writing, we can also have them start to look at other things. And so at the college level, I'll even go so far as to have students think about the purpose of their writing and their audience and the stance they're taking towards their topic and the design choices that they make, the word choices that they're making, things like sentence structure and grammatical conventions, and organization. And so this image on the right is of a business letter. So in my technical writing and professional writing class, I have students look at genres like a business letter and unpack all of those different aspects of genre when they think about both reading letters and also producing their own letters as writers. Another strategy is thinking about keywords and phrases and how those are used in particular types of writing. So in this case, I've given an example of transition words and phrases that show contrast. So these might be useful in pieces of writing where you need to differentiate one idea from another, or one thing from another. And so providing students with the kinds of moves that writers might make to create different sorts of logical relationships can help them implement those in their writing and also create more variety in the ways they approach those sorts of moves across different genres.